Greetings to friends of Dobara, to Mateen, to Samin. Thank you for inviting me. My task today is easy, as Rumi is everyone's favorite. While most of what I say will be in English, there will be a smattering of other languages, mainly Farsi and sometimes Urdu. So bear with me. My topic is the importance of Rumi. Why is he relevant after more than 800 years? Why do we need him more? So, Farsi is one of the most melodious languages of the world. It is at the same time profound. The best known Farsi poets are Firdausi, Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. Can we have the slide of Rumi first? Samin, can we have the slide? Okay, this is Maulana Rumi on horseback, surrounded by all his admirers. Next one, please. Next slide. Yeah. So the best known Farsi poets are Firdausi, Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, Sheikh Sadi, Hafiz-e Shirazi, Umar Khayyam. These are the important poets of Iran. Actually, the first four are very important. Umar Khayyam is not considered in the same rung as the others, but we like to include him in that group. The Mughal invasion happens in the growing years of Rumi, thus interrupting his life. No other language provides couplets to suit all occasions. But even Sheikh Sadi, in his wildest dreams, could not have imagined that his verses would adorn the entrance to the United Nations in Geneva. Slide, please. Third slide. Yeah, this is the entrance to the United Nations of Geneva, and Sheikh Sadi's verses are inscribed there. बनी आदम आज़ाई एक ही दीगरंद के दर आफरीनश दे एक जोहरंद. All human beings are in truth akin. All in creation share one origin. چو عضوی به درد آورد روزگار دیگر آزوهارا نمانند قرار. When fate allows a member pangs and pains, no ease for other members then remains. If unperturbed, another's grief you cannot scan, you are not worthy of the name of man. Tu kas mehnate digaran begami, na shayad ke namat nehand adami. You are not worthy of the name of man. Why did UN put up this verse of Sadi? After the World War, leaders forming the League of Nations realized that we should heed the profound words of Sheikh Sadi. Bani Adam Azai Eki Digaran. And we should share each other's pains and troubles. And of course, not cause them as we are doing now. Nor did Mevlana Rumi, next slide, I think, or take away the slide. Okay.
Ismat Mehdi, may I disturb you a minute?
Yeah.
The microphone has to be a little louder, I think. Possible, please.
I don't know.
The audience wants a little louder.
I'll speak a little louder.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no, we don't need the slide now. Okay. Now, coming to Mevlana Rumi, he did not dream that UNESCO would designate 2007, his 800th birth anniversary, as the year of Rumi. So, why is he relevant after more than 800 years? Why do we need him now? We thought that after the horrendous wars of the 20th century, partition of our country, and tragedy of Palestine, the 21st century would be a more peaceful one. But the opposite has happened. Rich nations have waged series of unjust wars on large areas of the globe, leading to militancy, large-scale migrations, and uprooting of settled populations, the consequences of which the rest of the 20th, 21st century is witnessing. In the vast, terrifying worldwide turmoil we find ourselves in, Maulana Rumi calls for a basic humanistic approach. He calls for a blending of faith with the spiritual. He says peace comes from peaceful coexistence, from interfaith harmony, but we are fighting in the name of religion. This is what he says. The difference among creatures comes from outward form. From outward form. When one penetrates the inner meaning, mana, there is peace. O marrow of existence, it is because of the point of view in question that there has come into being differences among the Muslim, Zoroastrian, Christian, and Jew. How will we find the courage, the passion, the soul force to face the world if we do not know who we really are? What else can give us the strength and inspiration we need to bear all the sacrifices and hardships that lay ahead, but a vision of the real divine nature of human life and the world? Sufism is the path that Rumi advocates for us. Free ourselves from human vices and weaknesses in order to acquire qualities of love that transcend the mind. Here, I would recommend a Turkish serial now showing on Netflix called Yunus Emre. It is called Yunus Emre, The Journey of Love. It illustrates how love transcends the mind, how it overcomes the mind. To get a flavor of Rumi's poetry, let us begin with a few verses that tell of a Sufi's quest for reunion with divinity called Haqiqat. An an important first step of which is detachment. The Sufi has to pass through several stages, pass several steps to rub away the self, to achieve fana, to achieve annihilation. Today, the world is growing more and more materialistic. People want more and they want more. There is a widening gap between the rich and the poor. To bridge the gap, we should beware of attachment to consumerism and heed Rumi's advice. This is what he says. If you can detach yourself from all worldly worries, you will live in the rapture of eternity's garden. If you can separate yourself from the house of desires, you will come into the sanctuary of divine mercy. In the heart of the ocean of unity, You are not a pearl that any worldly money can buy. If you are brave enough not to grovel in the dust, you can find a home in the heights of heaven. Here I shall describe the forces that shaped the life of one of the world's greatest poets, how they are reflected in his verse, and how they are relevant today, even more than 800 years later. Now, it is not exceptional that sudden encounters take place between two evolved human beings who then become inseparable. Saints are said to recognize their spiritual doubles in the most unlikely places. Imagine a 40-year-old sophisticated, reputed scholar and Sufi suddenly embrace a wild, unkempt mystic who seemed to appear out of nowhere. He was the Shams of the breeze. Now, slide 4, I think. Samin? Uh, Slide 4. This is the Shams of the breeze. Rumi's meeting with Shams was unique since it was not the usual adoration of divine beauty in the shape of a youthful person, but the meeting of two mature mystics of great personal strength. This dramatic encounter changed Maulana's spiritual life. The frontiers of the intellect suddenly appeared too narrow, constructing claustrophobic. Shams, a compelling figure of mysterious power, put Maulana through rigorous tests and occasionally cruel tests, from which Rumi emerged obedient, selfless, deepened, and enlightened. Through the influence of Shams, Maulana discovered the inner secrets of love and the realization that love transcends the mind. To understand the mystical connection between the two, we have to allude to a simple simile, that of a building which is ready for occupation but is dark. Now, the building is ready for occupation and it is dark. It is in need of an electric impulse to light it. Rumi had followed the different Sufi paths. They are called suluk, different Sufi paths called suluk, that lead to the love of the divine, but had not reached the pinnacle. He was, in other words, a dry Sufi, but ready for a change, ready for the dryness to end. Maulana Rumi, in other words, was a purified, cleaned lamp in which oil had been poured and the wick had been placed. To make this lamp burn, a fire, a spark was needed, and there was Shams to do it. Slide 5, please. I think that we've seen it. Rumi's early life was spent in Balkh in Afghanistan. So can we see the map now? Rumi's early life was spent in the map. Next one. Was spent in Balkh in Afghanistan. Now I'm showing the route that Rumi took to run away from the Mongol invasions, which started from 1215. So they had to be uprooted. Along the way in Nishapur, Iran, the young Jalaluddin received the blessings of Fariduddin Attar, the most renowned Sufi saint of the day. Attar is reported to have said, as he saw Rumi's father walking towards him, with the young Jalaluddin a little behind, here comes a sea, here comes a sea, followed by an ocean. See, so beautifully put. Here comes a sea, followed by an ocean. The family finally settled in Konya. Now they settled in Konya, and it is here that Rumi spent the rest of his life. It was a very long journey, and from Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Arabia, a lot of the Syria, Jordan into Turkey in Konya. Now Konya was one of the first. It was one of the few places in the Muslim world that was safe from Mongol onslaughts. It was a magnet that attracted scholars, artists, and mystics. Like his father, Rumi became a religious scholar. He was also initiated into the mysteries of Sufism by the leading Sufi of the day, Burhanuddin Tirmiz, who predicted, "A great friend will come to you, and you will be each other's mirror. He will lead you to the innermost parts of the spiritual world, just as you will lead him. Each of you will complete the other, and you will be the greatest friends in the world." Now, this is the prediction. After 15 months of friendship, during which Maulana was in bondage to his moral and mystical guide, Shams, Shams the sun mysteriously disappeared. Maulana was shattered in deep despair. He composed heart-rending poems full of images of burning from separation, from unbearable longing and spiritual exile. For Maulana, Shams constituted the embodiment of God as well as the symbol of humanity. His disappearance seemed as if it were God's act of abandoning mankind. After several searches, Shams was brought back to Kunya by Rumi's son. We have a description of their meeting after Shams's return. They embraced each other and fell at each other's feet, so that one did not know who was lover and who beloved. In the words of Amir Khusro, "I have become you and you have become me. Man to shudanam to man shudi, man tan shudam to jan shudi. Ta kasna guyad badizin, man digaram to digari." I have become you and you have become me. In my body is your soul. May none say hereafter that I am different and you are different. Manto shudam to man shudi, mantan shudam to jan shudi, ta kasna guyad badizin, mandigaram to digari. We have an echo of this verse in the Urdu poet Siraj Aurangabadi. He says, "Khabare tahayyure ishq sun, khabare tahayyure ishq sun, na junu raha na pari rahi, na to tu raha na to main raha, jo rahi so bekhabari rahi." On learning the amazing saga of love, neither the frenzy was left, nor did the sweetheart remain. You were thee no more, I was me no more. Only a state of oblivion remained. Rumi himself wrote a poetic celebration of reunion, and it sounds beautiful in Farsi with the words mano tu, man o tu, you and me, ending all the verses. Khurakas dam kinishistam, daro divan, mano tu, badu naqsh, wa badu surat, bila jan, mano tu. Blessed moment, here we sit in this palace of love, you and I, Manotu. We have two shapes, two bodies, but a single soul, you and I. The colors of the gardens and the songs of the birds among the flower beds will make us immortal, you and I. The stars of heaven will come out to gaze at us. We shall show the stars the moon herself, you and I, Manotu. United in ecstasy, we shall no longer be you or I. This is a beautiful poem. The lyrical poetry born out of this experience is inspired from a feeling of complete identification. Instead of using his own pet name, Jalaluddin uses his friend's name as nom de plume at the end of his poems, in which he sings of love, longing, happiness, and despair in verses that have never been surpassed in their beauty and sincerity. It was this experience that he described in a famous passage of the Masnavi, slide 6, I think. A man knocked at a friend's door. His friend asked, "Who is there?" He answered, "I." "Begone," said his friend, "'tis too soon. At my table there is no place for the raw." How shall the raw be cooked but in the fire of absence? What else shall deliver him from hypocrisy? He sadly turned away, and for a whole year the flames of separation consumed him. Then he came back again and paced to and from beside the house of his friend. He knocked at the door with 100 fears and reverence, lest any disrespectful word escape from his lips. "Who is there?" cried the friend. He answered, "Thou, O charmer of all hearts." "Now," said the friend, "since thou art I, come in. There is no room for two eyes in this house." The intensity of Rumi's relationship with Shams became so overwhelming that some of his disciples decided to send him to a place from where there was no return. This was a few moments after the reunion. This disappearance caused a spiritual implosion in the Maulana. He searched for Shams for 2 years, but at last he realized, why should I seek? I am the same as he. His essence speaks through me. I have been looking for myself. As Muhammad Iqbal comes to the same realization, तू ये कहता है कि कर दिल की तलाश, तू ये कहता है कि कर दिल की तलाश, तलब दिल बाश वो दरे पैकार बाश। वो मेरा दिल है, मेरे सीने में है, मेरा जवाहिर मेरे आईने में है। You ask me to search for my heart. It is not easy. You have to struggle hard and pursue in your struggle. My heart is deep within my breast, and its essence is only seen in a flawless mirror which does not lie. The union became complete. There was full fana, or annihilation of the self in the friend. Rumi fell into the ocean that was Shams. Out of this experience came a huge wave of poetry that Rumi called works of Shams of Tabriz. Shams had disappeared permanently, and when Rumi recovered from his loss, it is said that he found Shams in his own heart. A lover asked his beloved, "Do you love yourself more than you love me?" Beloved replied, "I have died to myself that I may live for you. I've disappeared from myself and my attributes. I am present only for you. I've forgotten all my learning, but from learning, knowing you, I have become a scholar. I have lost all my strength, but from you, I am able. I love myself. I love you. I love you. I love myself." Rumi's travails, which resulted from this experience, show all the stages of mystical passion: longing, yearning, searching again and again, hoping for a reunion, for a love without limits. Not alone kept I singing Shamsuddin and Shamsuddin, but the nightingale in the garden sings, the partridge in the hills, days full of splendor, Shamsuddin, and turning heaven, Shamsuddin, mine of jewels, Shamsuddin, Shamsuddin, the endless sea. It is said that the whirling dance to the accompaniment of the reed flute is an expression of the lament for the absence of Shams. Rumi's whole being was transformed into poetry and music. Music became the only expression of his feelings. Music echoed in enthusiastic words, vibrating in the rhythms of his lyrics. Not long after Shamsuddin's death, Rumi experienced another mystical love relationship, another mystical relationship with a goldsmith called Salahuddin Zarqu. It is said that Rumi was walking through the goldsmith's bazaar in Konya, listening to the melodic hammering in the shop of Salahuddin Zarqu. He began to turn in mystical rapture, asking Salahuddin to join him, and both danced for a while in the bazaar. Now, this reminds me of our own silversmiths behind Charminar, pounding silver, making varaks, melodically, methodically, musically. Imagine then the narrow lanes of Konya, lined with goldsmiths, hammering away their gold melodically, musically, and Rumi listening to their beat, to their rhythms, and then rising spontaneously to twirl and to whirl. Salahuddin then returned to his work, but Rumi continued whirling for hours. Thus was born the Maulavi Sufi order of the whirling dervishes, whose mystical dance recalls the order of the heavenly spheres in sedate, gyrating movements. Slide, I think. Whirling sama means listening to music, moving with the excitement induced by music, and entering into ecstasy. Whirling produces many spiritual states. These spiritual states clean the vices in the heart and finally open the eyes of the heart. Whirling is to find God in one's heart through the influence of music and turn like a moth in this excitement. The whirling is not a mere turning of the body. The whirling is turning with the heart, spirit, love, faith, and with all one's physical and spiritual existence. Eventually, Rumi's disciple, Husamuddin Chalabi, inspired him to write the Masnavi. For years, Husamuddin accompanied the master, noting every verse that flowed from his lips, be it on the street, in the bath, during the summer, or in the home. Imagine the profound relationship between these two also. The political situation in Anatolia after the Mongol conquest of Baghdad. Now, the Mongol conquest of Baghdad started in 1258 and it was disastrous. After the Mongol conquest of Baghdad, it grew worse year by year. So the political situation in Anatolia became very bad. Many intellectuals moved away to Syria, to Egypt. Rumi was fading away and he died in 1273. After the funeral, sama and music went on for hours and hours. Rumi said, "When you come visiting my grave, my roofed tomb will appear to you dancing. Do not come without the tambourine, brother, for a grieved person does not fit in God's banquet." Rumi's most famous work is the Masnavi, the greatest of Persian and perhaps even of Islamic mystical monuments. This volume of 26,000 couplets is divided into 6 parts and consists of mystical and Islamic subjects presented through anecdotes. It contains almost every conceivable mystical theory known in the 13th century, a poetic work of unquestioned genius, erudition, and deep religious feeling. Rumi says the Masnavi is without end. It is without end, even if the forests were pens and the oceans ink. Maulana says this referring to the Quranic verse that Allah's words are without end. قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات ربي. Jalaluddin was certainly an inspired mystical writer. It is said that for the most part, he dictated his verses in a state of rapture or even trance. His rhythms often suggest the turning and the whirling movement out of which they came. The inspiration for the rhythm and dance came, as we noted earlier, from the hammering of the goldsmiths in the bazaars, as well as the sounds of watermills in the gardens of Kunya. The most famous expression of this love of music are the 18 introductory verses of the Masnavi, commonly known as Sher-e-Nai, the Song of the Reed. The Song of the Reed. This is the most famous part of his whole production. Slide 9, I think. Vishnu az nay chun hikayat mi kunad, az judaiha shikayat mi kunad. Listen to what the reed is saying and how it is complaining of separation. Kazniyestan tamura bubride and az nafiram mardozan nalide and. The reed is saying now, ever since I was torn from my reed bed, My plaintive notes have caused men and women to mourn. Kasniestan tamara bubride and aznafiran mardozan nalide and Sine khaham sharh asfara tabi goem sharh darde ishtiyaq. I need someone whose bosom is all torn with separation. To him, can I truly explain the pangs of longing? सीने का हम शरह असफिरा ताबी गोयम शरह दर्द इश्तियाक मन बेहर जमियती नालान शुदम जुफ्तुक बदहालान व खुशहालान शुदम. In every assembly I have been mourning, both among the happy and the unhappy. And this is my favorite. हर किसी अज़्ज़न खुद शुद यार मन अज़ दुरून मन नजुस्त असरार मन. Everyone befriended me according to his concept, but no one searched for the secrets of the sorrow within me. The reed flute is the symbol of the soul, which can utter words only when touched by the lips of the beloved and moved by the breath of the spiritual master. Man, cut off from the eternal ground of his existence, like the flute from the reed bed, complains like the reed. Jalaluddin often saw himself in the pangs of separation, passionately complaining like the reed. He felt the inspiration through Shams enter into his empty heart like the breath of a flute player. Does not the flute open 9 or 10 eyes to behold the friend? In verses that repeat, Rumi has alluded to the enrapturing, maddening power of the ney of the flute. Much later, the French poet, symbolist, Paul Verlaine, in his musical emotional quest, almost echoes Rumi. In Verlaine's case, it is the violin. Les sanglots longs des violons de l'automne blessent mon cœur d'une langueur monotone. The long sighs of the violins pierce my heart with a lingering monotony of sadness. But of course, Rumi's verses have a unique spiritual angle which Verlaine's don't. If we look at the world today, we see that people who matter are creating hatred, not love. In olden days, too, there have been despots. But now technology has gone into a few hands and it can totally control whole populations. It is an Orwellian situation, dangerous situation with Big Brother watching. But Maulana Rumi gives us hope in these lines. A short time spent in the company of saints, a short time spent in the company of saints is better than a century of earnest worship. Be thou granite or marble, the association with the pious will make thee a gem. Engrain in thy heart's core love for the virtuous. Reserve thy heart for loving the contented, the mystics. Take not the road of frustration, there is hope. Turn not to darkness, there are suns. For all his flights into ecstasy, Rumi was a deeply religious Maulana. But it is the blending of his faith with the spiritual that makes him immensely appealing and relevant. A typically thought-provoking poem of Maulana is grief is more worth than the empire of this world. Grief is worth more than the empire of this world. God gave Pharaoh hundreds of goods and riches. God gave Pharaoh hundreds of goods and riches, so he laid claim to omnipotence and majesty. During his entire life, this perverse man didn't feel a single suffering that made him lament for God. God graced Pharaoh the empire of this world, but he didn't grace him pain and suffering and ordeals. Grief is worth more than the empire of this world because it makes you call on God in secret. The cries of those the cries the cries of those free from pain are cold and dull. The cries of the agonized spring from ecstasy. Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi was not a poet who happened to practice Sufism. He was a great Sufi master, the rhythms of whose soul were expressed in poetry. He is one of the greatest spiritual and literary figures whose verses have relevance centuries after his death. Let us end with these memorable lines of the Maulana, which should be hung in every home in letters of gold and felt likewise in every heart. Be like the sun in compassion and mercy. In hiding others' defects, be like the night. In anger and irritation, be like the dead. Be like flowing water in generosity and offering help. In tolerance, be like the ocean. Be like the earth in humility and humbleness. Either seem as you are or be as you seem. Let us take strength from Maulana in these troubled times and cultivate Sufic stances to calm our minds and bring peace to our hearts. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and for your patient listening. Thank you.